Officials say the frontline town of Tokmak was attacked by Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian forces have attacked the frontline town of Tokmak in southern Ukraine, about 70 kilometers northeast of Melitopol, officials from both Ukraine and Russia have confirmed. The attack was probably carried out by HIMARS, said Vladimir Rogov, a member of the Russian-installed civilian military government in the Zaporizhia region. Rogov claims Ukraine has attacked a peaceful territory. A gas station at the entrance to the city was severely damaged, 2 private houses, a gas pipeline and power grid facilities were damaged, he added, adding that 2 civilians were injured. Love. On the Ukrainian side, the exiled mayor of Melitopol confirmed residents had reported big explosions in Tokmak. The full name of HIMARS in the U.S. Army is the M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. It's basically a 5-ton truck carrying a rocket launcher that can launch 6 rockets near simultaneously, sending their explosive warheads beyond the front lines of the battlefield, then quickly change position to avoid counterattack. HIMARS fires projectiles known as guided missiles with ranges of 70 to 80 kilometers. And their GPS navigation system makes them extremely accurate, within about 10 meters of the intended target. 2. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Zelensky talk for the first time since the Russian invasion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he spoke on the phone with Chinese President Xi Jinping for the first time since Russia's all-out invasion of Ukraine. I had a long and meaningful phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping. I believe that this call, as well as the appointment of Ukraine's ambassador to China, will give a strong impetus to the development of our bilateral relations. During a press conference at the Beijing Press Center on Thursday morning, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Mao Ning said that during the phone call, Xi and Zelensky exchanged views on the Ukraine crisis, in which Mr. Xi reaffirmed China's support for the peace talks. She said China would send a special envoy to Ukraine and other countries to help conduct in-depth communication with all parties to politically resolve the Ukraine crisis. Mao Ning added that she also said that China was willing to continue providing humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. China will not sit and watch the fire from the other side, nor add fuel to the fire, let alone take advantage of the opportunity to profit, Mr. Xi said, acknowledging that the crisis has had an big impact on the international stage and that the possible way out is dialogue and negotiation. The Ukrainian presidential office said the phone call lasted an hour and that the 2 leaders discussed many topical issues of bilateral relations. Particular attention will be paid to possible cooperative methods to establish a just and sustainable peace for Ukraine. The head of Ukraine's presidential office, Andriy Yermak, described the call as an important dialogue. In March, Mr. Xi met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. China has declared neutrality in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, with Beijing calling for peace in the conflict. But they also refuse to condemn the Russian invasion or make any public calls for Russia to withdraw its troops. Instead, Chinese officials have repeatedly said that the legitimate security concerns of all countries must be taken into account and accused NATO and the US of fueling the conflict. 3. White House says it remains to be seen whether Xi and Zelensky's phone conversation leads to any meaningful peace process. The White House welcomed the news that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping for the first time on Wednesday since the start of an all-out invasion of Russia, but expressed caution about whether the call could lead to some kind of meaningful peaceful development. We welcome the news of the phone call between President Xi Jinping and President Zelensky. We think that's a good thing. We have said for a long time that we believe it is important for President Xi Jinping and the People's Republic of China officials to respect Ukraine's position on this illegal and unprovoked invasion by Ukraine. Russia, John Kirby, the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications, told reporters. Whether that leads to some kind of progress or a meaningful peace plan or proposal, I don't think we know that right now, General Kirby added. Asked if China could help broker a peace deal, Kirby reiterated that it was subject to Zelensky's terms, and stressed that an agreement would not be durable or reliable unless individual Ukrainians and President Zelensky invest and support it. Kirby said the White House did not know in advance that the call between Xi and Zelensky would take place, adding that we don't necessarily expect that either. Wednesday's call was the first time she spoke to Zelensky since Russia invaded Ukraine last February. By comparison, Mr. Xi has spoken to Russian leader Vladimir Putin 5 times since the invasion, including a face-to-face meeting at the Kremlin when the Chinese leader visited Moscow last month and another face-to-face meeting at a regional summit in Central Asia last September. China has declared neutrality in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, with Beijing calling for peace in the conflict. But they also refuse to condemn the Russian invasion or make any public calls for Russia to withdraw its troops. Fourth, Russia says the possibility of resorting to nuclear weapons is increasing. Before Ukraine's counterattack, Russia is trying to scare the world. Newsweek ran a report titled "Russia Says Likelihood of Nuclear Weapons Being Used Growing by the Day," which means Russia indicates an increasing likelihood of resorting to nuclear weapons. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said on Tuesday that the possibility of nuclear weapons being used is increasing day by day. Mr. Medvedev, who served as the next president after President Vladimir Putin from 2008 to 2012 and is now vice chairman of Russia's Security Council, told reporters. Medvedev has regularly made nuclear threats during Putin's all-out invasion of Ukraine, which began last February. Putin himself said in a nationally televised address in September 2022 that he was ready to use nuclear weapons to defend Russian territory. Speaking on Tuesday, Medvedev said climate change was nothing compared to the prospect of a nuclear explosion. Don't suffer because the temperature rises 1 degree year after year, from time to time. Humanity has watched this for a very short time. Do you really care about the climate that much? He said, according to Russian state news agency RIA Novosti. Do you really care about the climate that much? In my opinion, this is nothing compared to the prospect of being at the epicenter of an explosion with a temperature soaring to 5,000 Kelvin, with a shock wave of 350 meters per second and a pressure of 3,000 kilograms per square meter, with radiation penetrating, i.e. ionizing radiation and electromagnetic pulses, he said. Medvedev said the possibility of nuclear weapons being used is increasing at a rapid rate. Is there such a prospect today? Unfortunately, that's true. And it's growing every day for well-known reasons, he said. Earlier, he cited the possibility of nuclear war if Russia was defeated in Ukraine. The failure of a nuclear power in a conventional war could trigger a nuclear war, Medvedev said when discussing NATO's support for Ukraine's military. The nuclear powers have never lost the major conflicts on which their fate depends, Medvedev added. In July 2022, he also issued a stark warning after the International Criminal Court said it would investigate allegations of war crimes committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. The idea of punishing a country with the largest nuclear arsenal is absurd and has the potential to pose a threat to the very existence of humanity, Medvedev said on Telegram at the time. Medvedev added on Tuesday that he believes the modern world is sick and very likely it is on the verge of a new world war. Is it impossible to avoid? No, that's not it, he added. World war can be avoided, but I won't make a forecast. Forecasting is a difficult business. Former Russian diplomat Boris Bondarev told Newsweek in February that Putin's nuclear allegation was a hoax. Putin is bluffing and we know that he lied about nuclear threats, Bondarev, who resigned over the invasion of Ukraine, said in a phone interview. Ukrainians have recovered some of their territory and there is no nuclear retaliation. If you fear Putin using nuclear weapons, then you have lost the war against him and he won. If Putin threatens to use nuclear weapons, okay, threaten him back. 5. Kyiv mocks Putin with a bird's-eye view of the Kremlin when spy drones are spotted. Newsweek had an article titled, Kyiv trolls Putin with bird's-eye video of Kremlin as spy drone spotted, means, Kyiv mocks Putin with a video shot from above of the Kremlin when the spy drone was detected. A Ukrainian official shared a panoramic video of Moscow's Red Square on Monday, when surveillance drones were found around the Russian capital. Ukrainian drones fly calmly over Moscow. It looks like the Kremlin palace has every chance to be in the affected area soon. Fireworks scheduled for May 9. Anton Gerashenko, advisor to Ukraine's interior minister, posted on Telegram, referring to Victory Day, Russia's annual anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Newsweek was unable to independently verify the authenticity of the footage and has contacted Ukraine's foreign ministry via email for comment. Tensions are rising in Russia ahead of an anticipated counterattack by Kyiv. In Moscow, a military parade was likely to be held in Red Square on May 9, but the traditional live parade of the Immortal Regiment was cancelled due to safety concerns. Security. Parades marking May 9 have also been cancelled in Crimea, and in the cities of Belgorod and Kursk, which border Ukraine. In other comments on Twitter on Tuesday, Gerashenko said, Red Square will be closed from April 27 to May 10 for the preparation and organization of the parade. If I'm right, this has never happened in the history of Moscow, not even in 1941. Is the Kremlin afraid of anything? But one more thing, drones fell from the sky. Closing the square doesn't protect that, he said. On Tuesday, Russia's state news agency TASS said 3 drones with cameras were found in different parts of the Moscow region, including one not far from the drone. The driver was found with explosives in the Bogorodskoye district the day before. The day before, a drone with a camera and microphone was found on the territory of the Yugolek SNT in the Bogorodskoye municipality. It was found about 4 kilometers from the crash site of a Ukrainian drone filled with explosives, law enforcement agencies said. A spokesman for Russia's law enforcement agencies told TASS that Moscow was investigating the incident and that all 3 drones had been sent for inspection. We are trying to determine who they belong to and what they were launched for, a spokesman said. Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for the launch of the drone. Newsweek has reached out to Ukraine's foreign ministry by email for comment. Gerashenko also shared the 11-second video on his Twitter page, saying that Russian President Vladimir Putin was becoming more and more toxic. The only foreign leader participating in the Victory Day parade in Moscow on May 9 was the president of Kyrgyzstan. His invitation to attend was made at the end of March. This year, the aggressor nation will not have any protests or rallies dedicated to May 1. The Russian authorities will also not hold the traditional Immortal Regiment parade on May 9, he added. Volodymyr Yatsenko, co-founder of Ukraine's online bank Monobank and maker of the Dovbush T-10 reconnaissance drone, said he would give at least 20 million hryvnia or $543,000 to the drone maker, which landed on Red Square in Moscow on May 9. 6. Putin's new T-14 Armata tank launched in Ukraine. Ukraine has received, and will receive many tanks Leopard 2 from Germany and M1 Abrams from the US, Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia and currently vice chairman of the Russian Security Council, reassured the Russian people that this country has all kinds of weapons and one of the most formidable weapons is the T-14 Armata tank. On Wednesday, April 26, Russian media outlets simultaneously reported that Russia would deploy this type of tank on the Ukrainian battlefield. Newsweek had a report titled Putin's new T-14 Armata tank's debut in Ukraine, which means Putin's new T-14 Armata tank launched in Ukraine. Moscow has deployed its advanced T-14 Armata tank in Ukraine, Russian state media reported on Wednesday. RIA Novosti, a Kremlin-backed news agency, reported on the use of what is considered the most advanced tank by Russian President Vladimir Putin for defensive positions in Ukraine. The source did not specify where those positions were, but noted that the Armata tanks did not participate in direct attacks. Putin first introduced the T-14 to the public during the 2015 Victory Day parade in Moscow. This type of tank is considered superior to the T-90, which is considered a competitor to the U.S. Army's M1 Abrams and has fought in Ukraine. The arrival of the T-14 comes as military analysts describe Putin's forces in Russia as struggling and turning to a defensive strategy after failed offensive operations. A review from the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, released on Sunday described the Russian military in Ukraine as too disorganized and exhausted to maintain frontline positions. Important and said significant reserves will likely be needed to effectively carry out any future offensive operations during the invasion, starting February 24, 2022. According to RIA Novosti, Armatas is equipped with a remotely controlled unmanned turret as well as multiple layers of armor, explosive reactive armor blocks and a sensor-activated defense system. The second component is supposed to send rockets automatically to incoming missiles. Armadas is said to have a top speed of around 89 km per hour, and RIA Novosti reports that Russian tank crews have undergone combat coordination at training facilities in Ukraine. When the T-14s were first introduced by developer Uralvagonzavod, they were hailed as stealth because their stealth makes them difficult to detect by radar and other targeting devices. However, experts at Jane's Defense Weekly in 2015 refuted claims of stealth, noting that modern thermal technology is sensitive enough to detect any tank as it moves or fires. In January, the British Ministry of Defence wrote in an intelligence update that Russia is likely considering deploying a small number of its new T-14 Armata main battle tanks in Ukraine. However, the UK Department of Defence is skeptical of Armadas engaging in combat actions. Any deployment of the T-14 could be a high-risk decision for Russia. 11 years in development, the program was delayed, planned production scaled down, and there were reports of production bottlenecks. If Russia deploys the T-14, it could be mainly for propaganda purposes. Production is probably low, while commanders don't seem to trust this vehicle in combat. Guy McCardle, managing editor of the Special Operations Forces report, told Newsweek he agrees with the UK Department of Defence's assessment. British intelligence says Russian tank commanders can hardly trust Armata in combat. If it breaks, replacement parts will be quite difficult or impossible to obtain on the Ukrainian front lines, McCardle said. They are more sophisticated and capable than the old Russian tanks, but I do not consider them game changers for the Russians in Ukraine. Their primary value will likely be for propaganda purposes. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry by email for comment. 7. The American Institute for the Study of War says Putin is rumored to be overhauling the army because of the catastrophic attack. Newsweek has a report titled Putin rumored to be overhauling army over disastrous offensive, SW, which means American Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, which reports that Putin is rumored to be overhauling the army team for the catastrophic attack. Vladimir Putin is said to have overhauled his top military contingent following significant setbacks in the invasion of Ukraine. Military blogger Voyenko Kotenko Z wrote on his Telegram channel that the Russian leader signed a decree on April 20 on the change of military command and the dismissal of General Rustem Muradov, who served as commander of the Western Military District East, referred to as EMD. The blogger said that the layoffs came after serious losses of manpower and equipment in Volodar. The decree is said to have forced the retirement of Army General Alexander Dvornikov, who is said to have commanded Russian forces in Ukraine in April 2022. The blogger noted that the dismissal of Muradov may have been due to his catastrophic attack on the provincial town of Donetsk, the ISW said. The same presidential decree also forced Senior Lieutenant General Alexander Zuravlyev and other military leaders of the Western Military District, or WMD, to retire, according to the Telegram post. From now on, the mistakes and inactions of their predecessors will have to be corrected by other commanders who, I hope, will be more competent, the Kremlin said. Above and hopes that the reappointment of the commander of the airborne forces, Lieutenant General Mikhail Teplinsky, will have good results. Teplinsky was removed by Moscow from operations in Ukraine in January 2023, and last week, British defense officials noted that his reinstatement came after violent tension over the Moscow's military in Ukraine. On April 19, it was reported that the commander of the Russian Pacific Fleet, Admiral Sergei Avakiants, had resigned after an unscheduled test of the combat readiness of the fleet's units. However, another military blogger, Sladkov, wrote on Telegram that the dismissal was not related to poor performance in exercises in Russia's Far East but because the Avakians were forming a new organization under their control. Controlled by gas tycoons. It is unclear whether this is an intentionally vague reference to reports of Russian state gas company Gazprom setting up a private security company, the ISW said. The U.S. think tank has previously reported that Russian state gas companies, specifically Gazprom, are forming military groups. British defense officials said on Tuesday that Russia's winter offensive had fallen off the mark and that Putin's forces were focused on preparing for a much-anticipated Russian offensive. Ukraine. Russia's average daily casualty rate may have fallen by 30% since the beginning of the month, following particularly heavy Russian casualties in the first 3 months of the year, the British Ministry of Defense said. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Defense Ministry for comment.